Hi, my name's Caroline, and I did my portion of the project on the Zika virus.
And my name's Lakin, and I did my portion on the Ebola virus.
So the Zika virus is part of the Flaviviridae family, and its genus is the flavivirus, which is related to other mosquito-borne illnesses such as dengue, yellow fever, and West Nile virus. And the Zika virus contains single-stranded RNA as well as a cellular envelope, which typically makes it less virulent. And there are also thousands of strains that exist. So on the right here, you can see is a diagram of the Zika virus structure. And on the bottom is the immature cell, so the cellular envelope has not completely developed, whereas on the top, uh, the envelope has developed.
So the Ebola virus is also part of the Filoviridae family, and it has a thread-like irregular branching shape with an envelope, as you can see in the picture that I placed to the right of me. Its genome is single-stranded and it has a negative sense RNA, and there's 5 identified strains of Ebola. And Ebola was named after the Ebola River in Central America, but it has no correlation or connection to the virus itself.
So Zika commonly affects the nervous and reproductive systems, and it can result in neurological symptoms including degradation of the myelin sheath, which is known as Guillain-Barré syndrome. Uh, and then in the reproductive system, some of the normal microbiota found are include bacteria from the lactobacillus and staphylococcus families. So on the right, you can see that the reproductive tissues as well as the embryonic brain tissues are affected by the Zika virus.
The body systems affected by Ebola, the main things infected in less severe cases would be the gastrointestinal system, which causes the diarrhea and the vomiting and the abdominal pain. And its microbiota includes lactobacillus and enterococcus species. It also affects the nervous system with headaches, confusion, and in severe cases, seizures, and then respiratory distress and pneumonia due to the um, shortness of breath, but in severe cases, it does affect vascular damage, and it also affects the renal system and could impair kidney function.
So for the most part, Zika results in few symptoms in healthy adults, and a lot of people are actually asymptomatic. But some of the more common symptoms include things like fever, rash, headache, and joint pain. So it makes it difficult to distinguish some of the symptoms of the Zika virus from that of the common cold and flu. Some of the more rare complications include encephalitis, meningitis, and as I mentioned previously, Guillain-Barré syndrome. But the biggest risk is to pregnant women, essentially. And about the virus results in birth defects in about 5% of infants whose mothers were infected during pregnancy. And on the right here, you can see how the nerve is damaged during Guillain-Barré syndrome.
So the signs and symptoms of the Ebola virus in most cases that are less severe is the fever and the headaches with muscle pain, sore throat, vomiting, diarrhea, and abdominal pain with confusion and difficulty breathing. But in more severe cases, it would also be like a pretty high fever, a rash, bleeding internally and externally, confusion with seizures, and blood in urine or stools. And this little photo to the right just gives you a visual description of what symptoms could look like and how they feel.
So Zika is primarily transmitted by Aedes species mosquitoes, but they can also be transmitted by other species, mosquitoes as well. But the second most common mode of transmission is through unprotected sex, mother to baby, or in utero, or via blood transfusion. And you can see down here in the sylvatic or zoonotic cycle, the virus spreads between monkeys and mosquitoes. Um, and then the mosquitoes can pass the virus on to humans in what is known as the urban cycle.
And the mode of transmission for the Ebola virus, its primary mode of transmission is from fruit bats and other forest animals like apes or insects that are asymptomatically carrying the virus, and it's spread through bodily fluids like coughing or sneezing, from human to human. And then from animal to human, it's from fruit bats, apes, and antelopes via hunting, consumption, or butchering of these animals. And then it's also transmitted through postmortem care. If a healthcare worker is dealing with someone who has passed from the virus, they need to make sure they're taking precautions so that they themselves don't get the virus and that the people around them in burial sites don't get the virus as well. And it's also spread through sexual transmission through semen, even after an individual has recovered.
So Zika is most commonly found in tropical and subtropical regions in North and South America and parts of Southeast Asia and Africa. And it first emerged in the US in Miami, Florida in July 2016. But the first documented case you can see down here was actually in 1947 in a rhesus monkey in Uganda. So the virus has been around for quite some time, but uh, prior to this, it was mostly confined to Africa and Southeast Asia.
So right here, I have a photo showing the different countries that have been affected by outbreaks, continuing through these countries in this region of Central Africa. And the concentrated areas that have the little red dots are where the fruit bats live and where these areas have been infected.
So some of the factors increasing Zika virulence include a cell envelope composed of glycoproteins, which protects the RNA from external damage. And the virus also has a very rapid rate of mutation, which allows for the development of thousands of strains. And a lot of these strains actually inhibit interferon signaling, which allows the virus to evade the immune system. So here on the right is a diagram of the Zika virus replication cycle. And you can see that the virus enters the cell through endocytosis, it disassembles and hijacks the cell's machinery, and then it matures and exits the cell and allows for further replication.
So the virulence factors of factors increasing the Ebola virus would be first glycoproteins. They facilitate and bind and create entry into the host cell, which next would lead to the nucleoprotein that aids in viral replication within infected cells. And then through apoptosis induction, they weaken the immune response by promoting cell death. And then through immune system suppression, the virus kills immune cells, evading detection. And then inhibition of interferon response basically blocks antiviral pathways, promoting replication.
So, some of the best ways to prevent Zika transmission are mosquito control methods. So, avoiding being outside from dusk till dawn, which is when mosquitoes are most active, removing standing water around the home, as well as using an insect repellent containing DEET. And it's also important to use protection when engaging insects in areas with active Zika transmission, as there's currently no vaccine or antiviral for the virus.
Means of protection for Ebola. Currently, there is a vaccination, and I use quotations around that because it's sort of like the COVID-19 vaccine that first came out, where we didn't know what it was, but healthcare workers were required to get it. So this is just a sort of like placebo vaccine for healthcare workers that are in infected communities or areas working with people with the virus. And you could also prevent this by quarantining. If you or someone you know has come in contact with anyone with the virus, you would isolate yourself in healthcare settings or within your home. And if a loved one has passed away from the virus, it's important that they are buried in an environment or place where the virus cannot be spread, and that dealing with them, like I said in a couple slides back with the postmortem care, is handled with right precaution. And then obviously, travel restrictions are implemented during outbreaks to prevent the spread.
So, like I said previously, there's currently no antiviral for Zika. So, the most you can pretty much do in terms of treatment is taking a fever reducing medication like Tylenol, as well as increasing fluid intake. It's also really important to avoid NSAIDs, which are non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs such as ibuprofen, due to the risk of bleeding if the person is misdiagnosed with Zika and they actually have dengue.
So treatment for Ebola, there really isn't a treatment for it, but there are things that you can do to help prevent it and manage symptoms. There are FDA approved drugs that binds to glycoprotein and blocks the virus from entering host cells. And symptom management, you could always increase your hydration and use um, inflammatory or anti-inflammatories like ibuprofen and Tylenol to reduce fevers or muscle aches. And with severe cases, you are required specialized care for monitoring and symptom management.
So, some of the susceptible populations to the Zika virus include people who are pregnant or planning to become pregnant, as well as people with weakened immune systems. And you can see here that females from ages 20 to 29 were actually the most likely to test positive for the virus, according to a study conducted by the CDC in 2016. So Zika results in the most birth defects during the first trimester of pregnancy at around 8%, which makes it especially important to practice precautions in areas with known Zika transmission because a lot of people don't know they're pregnant at this point and only find out later on in the first trimester.
So populations that are infected by the virus are obviously healthcare workers and people that are living in these local community outbreaks, such as the Democratic Republic of Congo, Sudan, Liberia, Nigeria, and Central Africa regions. Hunters and butchers that are exposed to infected animals, family members and caregivers of those who are exposed to the virus, people traveling internationally, and pregnant women and children due to their suppressed immune systems. So this little image right here kind of shows deaths from 1976 through 2014. As you can see, the virus first popped up in 1976. Not many cases, not high death rates, but in 2014, there was a huge outbreak in Liberia, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, and another region up here to the left in the top left corner. And this just goes to show how active the virus was from 1976 to 2014.
Can you go to the following slide? So some of the public health challenges associated with Zika are a lack of awareness of and education on the disease. And as I mentioned before, it also lacks an antiviral medication or vaccine. And a lot of these communities have troubles with limited access to testing and weak healthcare infrastructures, which also impedes treatment. So you can see here on the right, this is a picture of a Brazilian favela and its high population density and subtropical location essentially further promote the spread of the virus. Can you go to the previous one? Okay. So another issue associated with the Zika virus is global warming because it increases the range of the Aedes species of mosquitoes, which you can see from this map here.
So some public health challenges in regards to the Ebola virus would obviously be weak healthcare infrastructure. This results in lack of adequate infection control and late diagnosis. So by the time people come in with symptoms, it's already very severe and hard to treat these cases, along with medical supply shortages that lead to issues with treatment distribution. There's a lack of awareness in the community, so it spreads fear and a lot of misinformation, kind of giving people like fear of the unknown and false information. And cultural practices, as I said before, there are traditional burial customs that these people in these areas follow that cannot be followed if a loved one has passed away from the Ebola virus.
So some of the long-term solutions for uh, eradicating Zika include developing a vaccine, which is currently in clinical trials, as well as increasing federal funding for research and education initiatives, and providing free or reduced prenatal screening for at risk individuals. So, here is a worker in the Miami Public School District educating students on how to prevent the transmission of the virus.
Some potential solutions of Ebola include early detection. The sooner you find out you're diagnosed with the virus, the higher chance of survival and control that you have over the virus. Obviously, stronger healthcare infrastructure, providing training on disease, public awareness, educating the community and people on prevention and response to being infected and the proper steps to take. And then research and development, investing in education and treatments. On this picture on the right, it shows a researcher at the University of Ohio working on an Ebola treatment. And it is quite expensive, so that is probably why we don't have a treatment for it yet.
So here's a table directly comparing the two viruses, and we mentioned most of this information already in our presentation, but I did want to point out that the incubation period for Ebola is much longer than that of Zika. So it's 2 to 21 days versus 3 to 14. And our following slides are references as well as our image citations. Thank you.